my sense of who I am as spirit to introduce to you the Reverend Dr. Ask him about that. Kenn Gordon, speaking to us with the title, "Everything I Have Comes From What I Gave Away." That's Ken.
Thank you, Michael. Well, it's nice to be up here and look at everybody. Sitting up front, looking forward, I don't know what's behind me. I think that's a law of life. First thing I want to do is I just want to tell you how incredibly honored Deborah and I are to have been invited to participate in this wonderful weekend of dedication and this weekend of celebration. Friday night was magnificent. Deb says that she has musician envy now. And Chris, wherever he is, was certainly one of the highlights, a tremendous musician. It's always great to come to Chico. I've been here, I don't know, 4 or 5 times, I guess, and I've never brought Deb with me, or as Michael calls her, the pretty one, and I've never brought her along with me before. And I'm so glad that we came this weekend, and it is so gorgeous. We're driving around, and Michael kiddingly says, showing us neighborhoods, but all the time my eyes are really open to it. This has got to be, and I traveled a lot. You might figure out that I've been pretty much all over the world in the last 7 or 8 years, but specifically all over the United States and Canada. And I've got to tell you, this is the prettiest, nicest community that I've been in. This is a fantastic place. And the people, it's not just the beautiful trees, although that's certainly appealing, but it's also the people. There's a very warm, beautiful warmth that is here. And I trust that you're aware and grateful for this, that you really are awake, alert, and aware to the magnificence of where you live and where you happen to be sitting at this particular point, because my heart certainly pounds in the same rhythm as what's going on. My talk today is based on the generosity theme that Michael came up with. And generosity is a big part of our teaching. And the title, "Everything I Have," comes from giving it away first. Comes from a talk that I gave at I can't remember anymore, some church in Los Angeles. Am I red? And it really came from a talk that I was giving and that I was sharing with people. And it's one of the truths that we know, is that in order for us to receive anything, we first must be prepared to let it go and to put it back out again. It's done unto us as we believe, and more to the point, it's done unto us from who we are. And so when it came to the topic of generosity, I did a little bit of thinking about it. And, you know, I have always, in all ways in my life, thought of myself as a generous person. But what I've found in the last 20 or 25 years by being part of this philosophy is that there are various tiers to what we believe. And that as one enters into the consciousness of another kingdom, what happens is one gets to step into another tier and see everything from a different point of view and different eyes than we've ever done before. So, when I was younger and thought that I was generous, I would give generously of my time, I would give generously of my money, I would give generously of my talent, and I would share it. And I always had a sense of success and being filled back up again through that process. It was always something that I realized and I understood that in order to be able to receive in my life, it was first necessary for me to have that generous heart to be able to share back out again. And that through that activity and through that action, through that consciousness, through that feeling, through that belief, what would happen and what occurred according to the philosophy and the teaching is that everything that was necessary to fulfill and support that would be drawn and attracted back into my life. And in the initial stages when I was doing it, it was almost like a game that I would play, where I would go to somebody and talk to them and I would give them a gift. And when I gave them the gift, what I would do is I would walk away thinking, let's see how that gift works. Let's see where it's going to come back to me in my life again. Let's figure out how that's going to seep back into my being and my experience. And so I could mark it, and I could watch it, and I could look at it, and I could see that there was a success ratio that went with that. If I was looking for money and gave away money, then the end result is I'd wait, and the first check that came, many of you might have done this already, the first check that came in to me, I would recognize and I would see it as a manifestation of what I'd given out in the first place. Am I the only one who's ever played this game? Right. So I was always doing the things in my life based on a condition of an expectation of return. And that's like the first tier that I entered into in this teaching with that consciousness. And it worked then. It worked really, really well. And it also worked because I knew what I wanted or thought I wanted. So I could work it out. So I knew that if I wanted more money, I would have to find a way to be able to give away more. I even went so far as to surrender and volunteer so that I could have more time in my life because I realized the law would work. I knew that if I was skilled at something and that I gave that gift away to a group of people, that somewhere down the road someone would give me another gift that I could move forward with. And so I really began the first stage of my development in that area. And what I've discovered and what I see around the world is that a lot of people are in that stage. And what I also witness is that a lot of people don't leave that stage. And that's a good thing. There's nothing wrong with that. But the real gift, the real present, the real appreciation and understanding is when you can get to the next level. That's where you step out of the practice with an expectation of return and you enter into the practice with the knowing, the understanding, and the faith that the return is always there. Where you find yourself in a situation, as Dr. Carolyn was speaking about, knowing that that which you seek is already present. And you start living from the present moment instead of living from the expectation of it coming back to you in the future. Years ago when Deborah and I were first starting our center, we had a couple that came into our center, and they were a beautiful couple. We loved them dearly. And I can remember in the early days, we started our church, there were 12 people who showed up at our center the first, 1993 when we started the Center for Spiritual Living Kelowna. 12 people showed up, 8 of them were my family. So, I don't know who the other 4 are, I don't have a clue. But that's what we got, and that's what showed up, and that's how it entered into it. And I can remember 2 of those 4 people were this beautiful couple that showed up. And they were just the most wonderful people. And for the first year, what they did was they supported us every way you can think about. What would happen is we'd come into our hall and they'd help set up the chairs. And they'd go in the back and they'd make the coffee. They were always present at anything we did they would come to. They would come to classes. We even married them. They were delightful people. And as this happened and as this grew, we really became dependent upon them. And what I found as a young minister going in there is that I was just absolutely dying to give away my services. And so they would show up, and every time we got together with them, which was like 2 hours a day, 7 days a week, what we would do is counsel. So we were always helping and praying for them and praying with them and developing and guiding and leading them in the way they went. And when they took classes, we didn't think that we needed to charge them for the classes because they gave so much to the center. So they would show up and we would give them the classes and they wouldn't offer to pay. And even when I married them, they never paid. They just showed up and we married them and it was done. And there was this wonderful, wonderful union that came together. And it went on for about a year, and like I said, we were extremely dependent upon them. And then, lo and behold, one Sunday came, and they didn't show up at church. They just weren't there. So we thought, that's okay, they took a Sunday off, we're not going to pressure them. And so a few days go by, and we haven't heard from them. And so we think, maybe we should give them a call, find out where they are. So we called, there was no return call. And a little bit more time goes on, and the next Sunday comes, and they don't show up at church again. We think, wonder what's going on here. And so we tried to reach out to them again. No return, no response. Another week goes by, and they didn't show up. And another week goes by, and they didn't show up. And finally, we were talking to some people, and we said, whatever happened to these people? And they said, oh, they became Mormons. Nothing against the Mormon faith, but I mean, you'd think they would have let us know. So they disappeared. And so, you know, I really tailspun into this thing. Yeah, you know, it was like, oh, I've done everything wrong, et cetera, et cetera. And part of my spiritual practice is I do a couple hours every morning, to the best of my ability, of contemplation. And what I do is I lay out my day, and I space it in such a way that I know what I'm anticipating, and I get in touch with my feelings and what I'm actually thinking and my inner self. And then I do my treatment work around that, transform myself so I walk into the day bright, joyful, and happy. And one day I'm doing my contemplation in the morning, and these people came up into my mind, and all the pain of the abandonment and the betrayal that I'd invented around that came with it. And it was all there, and I was sitting there, and I was just kind of watching my thoughts roll through my head. I can't even say that I was doing it consciously, but I was just watching it. Now, I'll share with you that in the meantime that all this is going on, having started the center, and now we're in 1994, 1995, moving forward with it, money was a big issue with us. It was an issue that we had chosen we were going to deal with, and we were really putting our consciousness in that area. And my treatment work was around that. And I was starting it by treating that what I was going to do is get rid of all debt. I had come to the conclusion, we were tithers, and then we were paying ourselves 10%, and my greatest desire was totally eradicate debt from my life. Not allow it to be present in any way, shape, or form. And after a year of opening ministry, we had a fair amount of debt that we'd accumulated in the development and building of it. Plus, we came into ministry with a certain amount of debt. And so my goal was to be debt-free. And so my treatment for the last year had been something to the effect of, I recognize and know that I owe no one anything. I know that I do not have any encumbrances to anyone outside of myself. And so as I'm sitting there thinking about this couple who had disappeared, in my head, as the lines were going through, the line came up, this one here. And it said, I cannot believe that they left after all I did for them. I cannot believe they left after all I did for them. And suddenly it struck me. I suddenly realized and recognized what that second tier is that life is about me being able to give without an expectation of return. And that the issue with my generosity was that I had been bartering and dealing with my generosity for my entire life. That if someone came to me, I would love them because I expected love in return. If I were to give someone money, I would give it with an understanding that there would be a return that I would get back out of it again. If I gave my talent away or my gift away, I would do it with an expectation that I would get something back. So I determined at that day, at that moment, at that time, that I would no longer do anything in my life that wasn't done from a sacred heart of being able to give generously without any expectation of return. And it transformed my life in how I lived and what I received and how it came back. I started to realize that when I did counseling, that I was counseling for money. So instead, I still accept the money. Today, I still accept the money, but I do not do it because I expect to get paid. I do it because it is my gift to give, and I give it freely without any strings. And the expectation of any return that comes from it, I would put away. But I would not go and do it if I didn't want to. So it gave me the power suddenly to be able to start standing up and saying, no, I don't want to do that. No, I'm not doing that today. And it wasn't that I wouldn't normally have done it, but it was because I did not feel within myself that I could do it with the freedom I wanted. I even, years later, my brother came to me, and I love my brother. He was an adorable person, but he comes to me, and he needed some money, and he sat down in my office and said, will you give me this, will you lend me this money? And I said, I can't. I said, I don't lend money. There's only one thing I can do, and that's give it to you. It was a lot of money, so I remember going home to Deborah and talking to Deborah about it and saying, what do you think? And Deborah, who was still in the first tier, said, no way. And then I had to work it all out. I found it, I put it in an envelope in cash, and I took it to his house and I dropped it off with his wife and left. And I did it so cleanly that I had no expectation that it would ever come back again. I refused to carry that expectation with me as I entered into life. And sure enough, 3 months later, it came back, pressed down, flowing over, as we all know it should and could. But the expectation wasn't there to make it happen. My debt, by the way, when I started to realize that and act from that way, disappeared. Totally. Don't know how. To this day, 20 years later, Deborah and I do not owe anything. Now, we make deals around mortgages and stuff like that, but that's all a mind game. It's all done with smoke and mirrors. But otherwise, we don't borrow anything, and we don't lend anything. We give it, or we don't. When I entered into leadership in Religious Science International, I entered into it with the consciousness that what I was doing was I was giving, period. There was no question or expectation of return. I went in there and it didn't matter to me if I got something back in return or not. What mattered to me was that I could give joyously from my open heart. That I could give unconditionally, honestly, and cleanly and clearly. And it's that consciousness, it's that deliberation, it's that understanding and appreciation that has developed this life that Deb and I lead, which is an idyllic life. It's absolutely the best life in the world. We get to travel everywhere, we get to spend time together, we're always around like-minded people we love. It's a fantastic thing. And I will tell you, it comes from the fact that I learned to be generous with my soul instead of being generous by being a deal maker with how it works. And there's magnificent opportunities to see it everywhere, all around us. I didn't come here this week because I felt I needed to. I came here this week because I wanted to. I came here because I love Louie and Michael and Carolyn and Richard and Eileen and the friends that I have in Chico, you. I came here because I wanted to be present here at this moment with no expectation of return, just allowing simply the beauty of life to unfold and show up. And this happens so often in our life. And as a child, I remember trying to learn to be free that way. Deborah and I have two beautiful little grandchildren, 4 now and 7. They used to be 3 and 6. When they were 3 and 6, I remember the 3-year-old came to stay with Deb and I for the morning or something. And anyway, a little boy, and he came and he showed up. And I remember the heart feeling that I had. And Deborah, and Dr. Deborah, who I do call her Dr. Deborah at home, and if you're smart, you will too. Anyway, there's Dr. Deborah and I standing in the kitchen, and we asked Parker, our grandson, we say, do you want a hot dog? He said, yeah, I'll have a hot dog. So I took him and I put him on the stool at the kitchen, and he sat there, and Glimmy Glam starts making hot dogs. So she boils Dr. Glimmy Glam, and so Dr. Glam, and so she begins to boil a hot dog, and for me too. I would never get away with this, by the way. This is the meaning of this whole talk. But she starts boiling the hot dog, and we look around. We don't have any hot dog buns. So Deb takes a loaf of bread from the freezer, and it's still a little bit frozen, and it's been out long enough that, it's only got that frozen part in the middle, where you kind of knock it off, and the middle is really cold, but the outside rims are all soft and they're okay. So she takes that, and I remember she gets it together on a plate, and she puts ketchup and mustard on it, and then she puts the wiener in the middle of it, and kind of folds it, and flops back open, and she hands it over to Parker. And Parker looks at it and says, no, I can't have that. And she says, why not? And he says, well, I don't like mustard. She says, okay. So she takes another piece of bread and wipes the wiener off. And another piece of frozen bread, and she takes it, and she puts the ketchup on it. She puts the wiener in the middle of it and hands it to him, folds it, and says, no, I can't eat that. I said, well, why not? So, well, the bread keeps falling, the bun keeps falling open. It's not closed, so you can't eat that way. So Deborah takes the ketchup and she puts it around the lip of the bread and she folds the bread over and she kind of glues it all together to fit in. Have you never done anything like this?
Of course. Of
Do you not
course.
receive your goods sometimes with the same critical eye? I don't know if I want to accept that. She glues it together and she puts it together and she gives it back to him. And he takes it and he puts it in. I can't eat this. It's too cold. Because it's got the frozen piece in the middle. Smart kid. So there she is, and with a smile and absolute adoration and love, she takes and she puts it into the microwave, and she turns the microwave on for 2 seconds, brings it back out, and hands it back to him, and he says, oh, it's too hot. I can't eat this, it's too hot. So Deborah, here's Dr. Grandmother Deborah in the kitchen, blowing on his hot dog that's been glued together in the seams of ketchup. And gives it back to him. No, it's still too hot. Finally gives it back to him, and it's on the plate, and he says, no, I can't eat this either. I said, why not? He said, the wiener isn't equal. It's too far coming out one side, but not the other. So by this time I've been viewing this and watching it, and I'm just smiling. And here's Deborah serving humanity with an unconditional generosity. Not one that says, oh no, you've got to eat it the way it is. Not one that says, I'm only going to do it under these terms. Not one that says, I expect you to be grateful when I give this to you. Just simply, how can I serve you? So I thought I'd better help out. So I went over, and the wiener was a little bit too far over in the bread. Am I making sense here? Yeah. So I took the wiener in my 2 hands, and I pushed it, and I put it perfectly equal, and I put it in front of him, and he said, I'm not going to eat that. You touched it. I desire to live my life from a consciousness of non-judgment in what I give and how I give it. I desire to live my life and to receive my life in a way that I can see the beauty in what happens and what shows up in my life in every way and every means. I desire to live a life that's full and that is based on generosity, based on an ability to be able to give of myself without any expectation of return, and to give of myself without any expectation of not being good enough with my gift. I think that when you move to the second tier of generosity, when you move to that place in our lives where what happens is we start to do things because it's our desire and our soul's desire to be able to deliver it out into the world, that what happens to you is you enter into a realm of being and a consciousness which by its very nature must draw into your life and into your experience all that is required in order to fulfill your life of thanksgiving and your life of generosity. Now, I will tell you is that my entire experience with Reverend Michael and Reverend Louis was one of giving with unconditional generosity. There was no expectation that there was going to be some special pat on the back when they did things. There was no expectation that they needed something in return when they did something. I like people like that. I like people who I can trust they're going to give without me having to feel I'm indebted through the gift that comes with me. You are blessed to live in Chico. You are blessed to be part of this center. Because this center is not being propelled, moved, or motivated by a desire to do anything else than to be able to provide the light that is always present and to demonstrate it and show it without an expectation that you have to do something to get it back again. If you want to give to something and you want to give your heart to something, I strongly recommend you give where you get your good. That you give to an organization or a structure, that you give to your work, you give to your life, that part of your being which is the very nature of who you are in your authenticity and actualization. That's what this teaching's about. This teaching is about developing and building humanity so that what it can do is be its real self, as opposed to the dealers and the barterers and the fighters and the arguers. It's about being able to show up and be present as the truth of who you are. Because as Dr. Carolyn said when she was opening with the meditation, everything is already present and already there. What blocks it is our inability to be real, our inability to be truthful. What blocks it is our experiences that we do, that we don't really have the faith that everything is given unto us. Instead, what we do is we've developed and we build a faith that says, everything is given unto me as long as I do according to what the world says I should do. And I'm sharing with you is that when you step beyond that place, what happens is you become awakened. When you start serving from your life because it is your life, as opposed to an expectation that you're going to get a paycheck or you're going to be loved more. When you actually start being real, what happens is the world becomes real to you and it flows into your being and flows into your life and it works in perfection. And until that point, what we are is we're like 3-year-olds trying to get a hot dog. We're negotiating all the time on what we think we should get and how we should get it. We do it in the world, in the larger macro consciousness, by looking at the newspaper and saying, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. Without realizing and understanding that what it is it's a reflection of our own being, our own selves, our own lives, and the way that we deal and the way we think. It shows up in your life, in your loving relationships, based upon, I will love you if you love me. And a trade takes place. And what we learn to do is learn to love all unconditionally, to give it away no matter what. That is the second sphere. It shows up in your health, in your physicality, where perhaps what you're not willing to do is give of your energy, therefore your energy is taken from you. This is the motion, this is the movement, this is what we teach, this is our lives, we know it. We know it, we know it, we know it, we know it. We learn it the first time we walk through these doors into this sanctuary. We know it if we've taken classes. It's what's being taught. And it sometimes takes a little bit more time to move from that first tier of practicing it so that we'll get a result to actually living it because it's who we are. The type of people that I want us to be, and that us is religious scientists, the type of people I want us to be is I want us to be people who are authentic and who give our lives away without any fear that not enough's going to come back, because we truly understand the principle that there is one power, there is one life, there is one light, and that light is who we are, and we work together in harmony. This universe that we have has drawn and attracted everything without question and without doubt to work in perfection. The only thing that's wrong with it is we sometimes step out and think we're not enough or we need more. And at that particular point, what we end up with is results that we see in the world around us. We are the people who are on the cutting edge of consciousness right now. We are not the normal people. But from our lead and our model comes the rest. Everything in the world transforms and changes according to the structure of train thought. And we have the opportunity to enter into it. So what I would ask you to do is check out your generosity. I would ask you whether or not you're giving things in your life because you expect a return, or whether you're giving it's because it's who you are and it's your natural way of being. And I will tell you, you're better served if you give from your own soul rather than giving from some kind of a business deal. I love you, I bless you, I'm honored to be here, and thank you so much.